Sexual Violence and Harassment Action Plan Act. Speaker, it's my a great honor to speak on this bill. I will be sharing my time with the MPP for Burlington. And so just wanted to get that out as I was getting stares from other people. Everybody's breathing now in this place. Speaker, I'm really honored to speak on this bill for a very important reason, because one big element of this big bill, especially Schedule 6, dealing with Residential Tenancies Act, is an adoption of a private member's bill that I have tabled twice, once in 2010 and the other time in 2011. But most importantly, Speaker, and I'll speak to that in a second, most importantly, Speaker, I think we all have to acknowledge how important this issue is, and that is putting an absolute end to sexual violence and harassment in our society. There is no doubt, Speaker, that the majority, vast majority of victims of sexual violence and harassment are unfortunately still women, men who receive that as well. People from LGBT community are also suffer from sexual violence and harassment, but women in general are a large number of it. I really want to sort of read a part of the preamble of this bill, which I think really highlights in strong terms the resolve of this legislature when it comes to ending sexual violence and harassment. It states, the government will not tolerate sexual violence, sexual harassment, or domestic violence. Protecting all Ontarians from their devastating impact is a top government priority and is essential for the achievement of a fair and equitable society. All Ontarians would benefit from living without the threat and experience of sexual violence, sexual harassment, domestic violence, and other forms of abuse, and all Ontarians have a role to play in stopping them. I think, Speaker, I don't think you will find anybody in this chamber or among Ontarians who will disagree with this very important sentiment, and I'm very happy to see that articulated in this bill, because we need to boldly say that there is no tolerance towards sexual violence and harassment and domestic violence, and we need to work collectively as legislators and society writ large to put an end to that. There are many elements in this bill, Speaker, that give action to that. There's work, as we know, that the government is doing through its Never Okay action plan. And of course, the important work that all-party select committee has done in listening to Ontarians and putting recommendations forward as to how we put an end. There is a real momentum, Speaker. There is a real momentum here from all members of the legislature, women and men, in our commitment to put an end to sexual violence and harassment and domestic violence. And in that regard, Speaker, I just wanted to share a little bit about the Schedule 6 of this bill, which I'm very excited and proud to see as being part of this bill. It's a result of a private member's bill that I first tabled in 2010 called Escaping Domestic Violence Act, Bill 53. It was debated in second reading in this legislature, and thanks to all members, it was passed unanimously at that stage. After the 2011 election, Speaker, I had the honor again of introducing the bill as Bill 22 and in 2011, and I am very excited to see that this bill is now part of a government bill and will become a reality. In the meantime that I have tabled that private member's bill, the same provisions around amending Residential Tenancies Act and making it easier for victims of domestic and sexual violence to be able to terminate their lease came into effect in two provinces, Manitoba and Nova Scotia, and I want to thank them for taking that lead. In fact, I distinctly remember getting a phone call from an MLA from Manitoba asking for a copy of the bill that I had tabled, and I'm glad that they got there first. They did the right thing, and so did Nova Scotia, and now Ontario is moving forward. But very quickly, I want to share where this bill came from. And Speaker, this bill came from a woman named Sarah. Sarah lived in my community in 2010. She approached me. She wanted to sit down with me, as many constituents do with all of us. I sat down with her for a meeting, and there she told me her story. She's a brave young woman. She's a single mom of a beautiful daughter. And Sarah told me her story of abuse, of domestic violence that she suffered from for 3 years. It took us 3 years of hard work and resiliency and being succumbed to that kind of abuse, that she finally was able to flee that abusive relationship with her daughter. But soon after she fled, she realized that the apartment where she lived in with her abuser was in her name. She was the actual tenant. Her name was on the tenancy agreement, and there were several months left on that lease, which she was personally responsible for paying. She contacted her landlord. Landlord refused, saying, no, you've got to live through the term of the lease, which she could not do because her abuser was still living there. And he had access to that place, and that was not a safe place for her to be. She's tenacious, she's a fighter. She kept talking to her landlord. The landlord got some soft spot in his or her heart, and I thanked them for that, and they did an early termination. But that's where Sarah then came to me and spoke to her MPP and saying, there's a flaw here in the law. We need to make it easier for victims of domestic violence or sexual harassment or sexual violence be able to get out of those leases if that's the reason why they're leaving. And that's what Speaker allowed me to start working on this bill. She was of great help to me in terms of doing some of the research, and we worked together and we drafted Escaping Domestic Violence Act. And I am thrilled that one woman's plight, which is symbolic of plight of many women in our society, unfortunately, is resulting in the creation of this bill. I also want to say an interesting point. Sarah did not want this bill to be called Sarah's bill or Sarah's law, because she said to me, this is more than her. It captures a lot of other victims of domestic and sexual violence, and therefore we entitled it Escaping Domestic Violence Act. And it is a testament and salute to Sarah that this will now become, hopefully with the permission of this House, law in Ontario. Sarah and I keep in touch. She calls me on a regular basis, finding out what the status of the bill is. So it was a very happy call when I had to tell her that this is part of the government bill. Hopefully she'll get an opportunity to speak to the committee as well if she feels comfortable doing so. But she's been doing a lot of education around this particular issue. I know Sarah wants to be a lawyer, and she will make a very, very good lawyer one day as well, and I know she's working hard towards that goal as well. But I think, Speaker, from my perspective, Bill 132 and in particularly Schedule 6 of the bill really crystallizes to me what our roles are as legislators. That's exactly, I think, we're supposed to do. We are representatives of the people we elected to represent. We are responsible to listen to their stories and give some expression to their stories. Sometimes it is in the form of legislation, other times is a form of advocacy, asking questions in question period, or impressing upon the government or our community to do things differently. It comes in different shapes and forms, but that's, I think, what makes us as the agent of change, is that we give expression to those voices who may not be able to amplify their point of views. And this is one, I think, direct example of a young woman who I'm sure at a certain point felt that there's nobody to listen to her, that there's nobody paying attention to her. And the credit goes to her resiliency, to her tenacity, that she never took no for an answer. Not only she took that bold step of fleeing from that abusive relationship, but then she just did not sit on laurels. She wanted to take that and make a bigger change. It's tough to come to your MPP and tell your personal story of that nature. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do, but she did, and she was persistent, and she made such a compelling case, and she had done the research that it allowed for her representative to move that issue forward, and now we are in form of Bill 132. I just want to thank all the members for their support and their collective work on this bill and on the broader issue of sexual violence and harassment. And I look forward to working with all members and making sure that we do put an end to sexual violence, sexual harassment, and domestic violence in the province of Ontario, Speaker. Thank you very much.